Hello, and welcome to the first lecture on a series for beginning Paint Shop Pro. We're going to go way back to the beginning, to the very basics of Paint Shop Pro, because there are some elements that are important for you to understand in any graphics program in order for you to be able to design a graphic that will be usable and good for print quality, and that can be shared or sold and usable in all graphics programs. Now, the first part of what we're going to learn is something very basic, and I'm only going to teach you how to maybe just do a new file and the components that make up making the new file, and for you to understand how those components play in printing and web. And a lot of these components, or what we're going to talk about today, is applicable for all graphics programs, whether it be Elements or Photoshop or Illustrator or Paint or anything like that. These are applicable to those as well, not just to Corel Paint Shop Pro. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File and New, and then this pop-up box appears. And what ends up happening is we get this box, and we're going to zoom in here. You can use your presets, and they come in different sizes for banners. If you want to do a navigation bar, a lot of these are set up for the web. You also have like some postcards, some CD inserts, and business cards, and even micro buttons. But in the candy wrapping industry, or actually not even just candy wrapping, scrapbooking, or even personalized products of any sort, we have a wide variety of templates available to us. So we want to create a custom template or a custom graphic to fit a specific template. So with that in mind, we're going to have to set our own width and our own height. So our width and height we can set, if we look over here, in pixels, inches, centimeters, or even millimeters. We're going to use inches because it is representative of the true physical size of the image. So if you were to set it in pixels, excuse me, I'm sorry, pixel actually means picture elements. And each pixel is a tiny dot within your picture. So we'll go a little bit more into detail on that here in a moment. But I'm going to use inches, and we're going to say a regular standard open-end candy wrapper size is 5.25 inches wide and 5.5 inches high. Now if we go down to the bottom, we can see that it already went ahead and set how much that will be in pixels. So if you need to know the pixel dimensions off of your inches, you have it. For your resolution, since we're doing this in inches, we'll want to do our pixels per inch. You can choose pixels per centimeter, but we're working in inches, so we're going to do pixels per inch. That is the number of those tiny little dots that will appear in 1 inch. Now, if you're creating something for the web, like a banner or a button or just a little graphic picture of some sort, 72 to 96 will be an adequate resolution. When I create iPhone wallpapers for people to use on their iPhones, I created it at 96 because it's an application process, or it's an application, and it uses the internal processor. So 96, when it's saved to the phone, it turns out beautiful, so it works great. But for printing, you'll want a higher resolution. Now many years ago, Jasic, when they owned Paint Shop Pro, their standard rule of thumb was, for how many pixels you had for your printer, you would want to set your print resolution to half. So for example, if your printer printed at 600 dots per inch, or 600 dpi, then you would want to set your resolution to 300. If your printer's printed at 300, then you would want to set the resolution to 150. But with so many different printers out there with different DPIs and everything, the standard has become that resolution of 300 is adequate for printing and does pretty well on print quality. Now keep in mind, not only is the higher your resolution, the higher your print quality, but it's also the larger the file. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, I have to shrink this picture down to fit in my template. That's because it was set at a higher DPI or a higher resolution in order for you to be able to have a good print quality. So for the standard, 300 will work just fine. So we'll set ours at 300. And now our image characteristics, it's however you want to create it, but typically a raster background is going to work just fine. We'll get into a little bit later into the difference between rasters and vectors and art medias, but for now we're going to set it as raster because you can add a vector to a raster later. Our color depth isn't exactly what it looks like. So for like an 8-bit channel RGB, which is for red, green, blue, it will actually display up to 256 colors, because this color depth is the number of colors that an image can display. So for example, your gray 8-bit channel, it is 256 colors black and white, but 254 shades of gray. So you have your black, your white, and then your shades of gray for 256 colors. Or so it's 256. Your index 2 color palette, it's simply that, just black and white. And then you have your 256 and your 16 color. Now what we want to go with is just our 8-bit channel, because 256 colors is adequate for what we're wanting. And if you're wanting to save your image as a GIF can only contain 256 colors. Now some of the newer graphics programs will give you an option of a 24-bit, which is 16.7 million colors. And I would not advise using that because not all media can display the 16.7 million colors. Your 256 should be adequate. And if you need to change it later, you can change it through attributes within PaintShop Pro. So for us, we will want to use our resolution at 300 for print quality, and our color depth can be set to 8 bits, which is 256. Now, for our color here, this is what our background will be when the image is created. I've set mine to transparent because I don't want a background image. But if you do want a background color, you can just click off of the transparent, click over the color, and a dropper will appear. And then you click on that with your left mouse, and you will have a palette that will pop up. And now it's called your material properties. And you can use a color, you can use a gradient, or you can use a pattern. But for us, for this, and for most of what you're going to create, you may opt for the transparent, because you can save it as a flattened image later. And we'll go a little more into detail about that. But right now, we're just worried about these components. The memory required is 10.5 megabytes. That's the amount of memory on your RAM, on your computer, that it's going to take up. 10.5 is not a lot. Once you have set your width, your height, your resolution, typically I leave it as a raster, 8-bit channel, transparent. We can see the RAM, we can see the dimensions, and then we just hit OK. Now you have a workspace here that will work for making a standard open end, and it will be the correct size for printing. It may need to be scaled down depending on your resolution, but this will be your work area. To close out a file, you'll just go to File and Close. Now, I'm going to open an image that I have already opened up earlier, and I've zoomed this in to 5,000% for you to see that when we're talking pixels, we're talking this little dot. It looks large here, but it really isn't. And if we zoom in just a little bit, what you'll see is that you have a dot here, and a dot here, and a dot here, and these are all in different shades of red, and we have some whites. So each of these dots represents 1 pixel. And now, if I zoom out of the picture, you'll see that all those little tiny dots actually made up this poinsettia that I drew earlier. So we don't actually see all those little dots when we're looking at it, and this is at 100%. But as we zoom in, those dots become more and more apparent. And when it prints, if you set your graphic up correctly, you won't print all dotty. So that is the end of Lecture 1, and I hope that you were able to understand a little bit about what those components are and what they represent, and it will help you to set up your graphic for your templates for better print quality and with higher color capacity. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you.